Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, please. I know, a room full of half Italian people. I'm asking to be quiet for a second. Yeah, exactly. If everyone would like to sit, have a drink, eat some dessert. In case any of you don't know, my name is Nick. I'm one of Uncle Chuck's. I call him Uncle Chuck, so Charles Pellegrino. Wait, where do you want me to go, Auntie Joan? You're like waving me on. You want me to come over on the side? Okay. The camera's set up right here, but that's fine. Nick, follow me.
We'll move it.
All right, I'll move to the center then instead. Good, good. Now half the crowd gets to see my butt. Fantastic answer. Thank you. Anyway, thank you. Whoever's listening. Been working hard on it. Anyway, so I am one of Charles, or Uncle Chuck, we'll call him for this speech. One of his most charismatic, charming, handsome nephews. Thank you, thank you. I play great to the older crowd. I love it. So yeah. My lovely Auntie Joni asked me if I wouldn't mind kind of kicking off everything. The most beautiful woman in the world, Auntie, thank you so much. I'm honored that you asked me to come up here and talk about, quite frankly, a great uncle. He was my great uncle technically, but he was a great uncle to me. He really was. He also helped spawn this beautiful family of Pellegrinos. They are, I mean, are two of the greatest guys in the world. You ask them, they'll tell you how great they are. They're just fantastic. No, this was a family that could have been tough to grow up in. You gotta have thick skin. There's a lot of chop busting, and quite frankly, none of them better than Uncle Chuck. He was one of those guys who just walked in a room, and it was just, hey, what's happening, baby? And then into whatever he wanted to talk about. And he just knew how to help hold court. As a kid, I even saw it, and he was the guy who I'm like, if I could be half that good, I knew I'd never be that tan. I mean, unfortunately, I don't get that gene from the Pellegrinos. Like, all the men are tall, dark, and handsome. I get like a quarter of that, so you take what you can get. But I want to keep this short before Anthony and Chuck talk about their father. If everyone could raise a glass to Chuck, who we all love, we all miss, but we will never forget, because today we are celebrating his life. This is not a sad day. This is a day of celebration for, quite frankly, one of the funniest men I've ever met. So, to Chuck. All right, now some crowd work. I'm just kidding. All right, if everyone could please welcome Anthony and Chuck.
That is a trained professional. He went to college for that, okay? It's kind of bullshit when following his act. I don't know why we ever asked him to kick this off. That was stupid. Well, one thing happened in church today. I'll go off script a little bit. You know, now that my dad passed away, I get premonitions from my dad. And he communicates things to me that should be communicated to the greater audience in this room, especially in church today. You guys really need to work on your communion. My God. My dad said someone was about to get struck by lightning. All right? Like, holy cow. Watch some YouTube videos or something. Holy shit. Anyway, we had a lot of things that we, in the works, cooking, talking about my dad. A lot of things to go about, things to do, things to say. My family vetoed a lot of the material. I can't.
Not appropriate.
And I'm left with this, what's in my hand. And I was wondering, do you want to hear the stuff my family vetoed? Or do you want to hear the stuff my family approved? I'm going to lose my wife over this one. She's going to walk out of the room. Well, I can't go to the vetoed stuff. I'm sorry. I just can't do it. I can't do it. So I want to thank you, Nick, for kicking this off. I really appreciate it. We'd also like to thank everyone for coming and enjoying this celebration with us. So it's been great. It's been great. What a perfect day it is today. We could not have scripted it any better. I mean, the weather's beautiful today. It's the exact weather my dad and our family would have wanted to celebrate today. So thank you, God, and thank you, my dad. These last couple months have been very busy for all of us, but especially for my dad. Getting into heaven is serious business, and it can take a considerable amount of time. Some people just get the rubber stamp. Right in. Right in. You know who those people are. My mom, Mother Teresa. You either get the rubber stamp right away, or there's a review process. Most likely, they looked at my dad's resume, looked at his credentials. It's going in the review pile. Per my research, the first thing they do during the review process is a self-assessment, where they flash in front of you your life actions, both good and bad, and let you self-reflect on these moments. As you can imagine, during this process, I'm sure my dad was doing a lot of commenting to himself under his breath. Such things as, Jesus, I can't believe they got that on tape. Or, oh, that was a bad one. And probably a few, shit, they got that too. I'm sure that was how the majority of his self-reflection went. After that, you go through the jury process. The good news is you just need a majority vote, 2 out of 3, to get into heaven. The bad news, the jurors are the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. And they almost always vote the same way. So you actually need a majority vote. Unanimous decision. Dad's resume was strong enough to get in on his own. I have a sneaky feeling he probably had to drop my mom's name a couple times to finally get past the pearly gates. Once they saw my mom's credentials, they were like, ah man, we gotta let him in. To use a sports analogy, think in terms of the replay of the touchdown and whether the nose of the football crossed the goal line before the player's knee went down. Picture a challenge flag thrown, a long review, multiple angles, multiple experts with varying decision, and finally the verdict comes back. Touchdown. So the next time when you see those challenges in sports going forward, whether it's football or the tie goes to the runner in baseball, think of my dad's final approval to get into heaven. It was that close. When my dad first arrived in heaven, all his friends and family were asking, what took him so long? His response to everyone, number 1, I just went through an exhaustive review process that took place. Number 2, I would have arrived a long time ago if my family did not nag the hell out of me to stay alive the past year. With that being said, I'd like to thank my mom for all she did to take care of my dad. I've never seen a person commit so much energy and passion to taking care of another person. Thank you very much. All right, let's try to get back to the story of my dad. Chuck and I are going to share some history and stories with you. Hope you enjoy.
Christian Maniscalco and Nick the Clown. Well, I got the history part, so we're going to go through some highlights of my dad's life. My dad was born in 1938, which is also known as the silent generation, which is something I've never heard of. And it's really hard to associate the word silent with my dad. But it sums up what my dad instilled in us. The principles of the silent generation were, be quiet, keep your head down, and work. Which is interesting because every time my kids would complain about their coach or their teachers, I would say, shut up, put your head down, and get it done. They also believed in a strong work ethic, and they were the builders of America. They were the people in the factories, the shipyards, utilities, and trades. They were the building of the middle class. I don't know if there's anybody left in here from that long ago. I did see a couple. But his first memories were of not having a lot of money. In fact, he would tell my mom all the time that he couldn't stand that he always only had one pair of shoes. And he couldn't wait till he got older to have, be able to buy more pairs of shoes and have as many shoes as he wanted. His first stories are of building his own scooters and bikes. I'm sure guys have memories of that. But he told me at times he would have to go to warehouses and break down pallets, try to find wheels to screw or nail onto the pallets. That became his scooter. Or he would dumpster dive for bike frames, tires, pedals, and he literally built his own first bike. It couldn't have been easy, and my kids, I know, would never do anything like that. This took ingenuity and was the beginning of him learning to work hard for what he wanted. He also had to make money any way he could. Do you remember the movie Goodfellas? There was a line in there that said, "Now get your own shoebox." And, well, my dad, shine box. My dad did have his own shine box, and he built it. And he would sit outside of bars and restaurants and shine shoes for $0.25. And that's how he made his money. That shine box is still in my mom's house. She took it out today. I was around that my whole life. I always saw it, and it just reminded me of, man, how tough life had to be back then. And it just humbled me to look at it all the time. The next thing he did, and you wouldn't believe it, this is a shocker. My dad was kicked out of multiple grade schools growing up because of that. He went back and forth between public schools and Catholic schools. The regulars couldn't break them, and neither could the nuns. But we're going to talk about a nun situation later. One of the reasons I truly looked up to my dad was he was one of the smartest guys I've ever met. He literally knew everything about everything. And there's a couple guys back there that can testify to that. He knew stuff from cars to boilers to air conditioning to construction. And hell, he even started his own electric company and he had no formal electric training. And it was pretty successful. This all started when he went to Harrison Technical High School, which is in Chicago. It was one of the biggest high schools in the country at the time. Everything from auto repair to plumbing to carpentry to welding and metalwork. This type of education led to the ability of him being able to problem solve, which is one of the biggest things that he passed down to my brother and I. After high school, leading to more technical training, he joined the Navy. He said it was the best decision he ever made. I think part of that was the fact that he lived in Hawaii for 2 years and spent most of his weekends on Waikiki Beach. In fact, if you ever asked him any stories about the Navy, he never once mentioned being on a ship. It was always about enjoying life on the beach. In the Navy, he took a myriad of classes, including refrigeration, HVAC, and diesel engine repair. He also took underwater welding and dive class. So I'm trying to picture, can you imagine my dad with one of those big old-fashioned helmets? That's what he had. He said all that gear weighed 100 pounds, and the workout and training for that was he had to run up and down the docks with that outfit on. And I just can't imagine my dad ever being happy with that situation. In fact, I really have never seen my dad work out. You probably can't picture this, but there's probably some photos up there, but he actually was in pretty good shape when he was in the Navy. During these years, he picked up a really ironic name, Cuddles, from his girlfriend in Hawaii. Has anyone thought of my dad as a cuddly guy. I mean, come on. I think anyone that knew him had trouble seeing this nickname. And I can only imagine him being greeted by Jesus, and Jesus saying, "Wait, you're Cuddles?" In the end, he truly loved the Navy, and he would have re-enlisted if he could have stayed at Pearl Harbor. All jokes aside, you can tell by his stories and the times he reminisced that he was proud to serve for Uncle Sam.
Run. You said work, I never saw him run. I never saw him run anyway. That's pretty funny. Anyway, after getting out of the Navy in 1962, my dad met my mom and was married in 1965. For those of you keeping score at home, they've been married 60 years, so congratulations. My brother was born in 1966 and I was born in 1970. My parents often refer to the period 1970 and after as their golden years. Coincidentally, it corresponded with my arrival. During this time period, my parents owned a liquor store and 2 bars in Forest Park. The bars had live music, served good food, and were rather popular in town. They owned Suburban Liquors on Madison Street, which was just west of Des Plaines, set back north on Circle Avenue, and set back in on Roosevelt Road. I was only 2 years old when my dad sold the bars, so I don't have any direct memories, but have heard stories from that time period told by my dad and his friends. Despite having a partner, my dad always said he did all the work. He did everything from ordering all the food, lining up the entertainment, planning the menus, and even acted as the head bouncer at the bar. From his stories, it was not pleasant getting bounced out of the bar by my dad. When my mom would ask him about blood on his clothes after he closed the bar, or the next day while she was doing laundry, he would say, "Don't worry about it, Joan. It was the other guy's blood." While my dad owned the bar, he freelanced as a volunteer police officer. What does that mean? Well, a lot of the Forest Park police hung out at his bar. And when he was closing, any of them that were on duty, mainly Chuck Welpley, would swing by and ask him if he wanted to join them. They would give him a gun, he would get in their car, and the volunteer police shift started. Apparently all you needed to qualify for law enforcement in Forest Park was to own a bar where the police officers from town. No formal training, no police academy, no badge. These were the good old days of law enforcement. The funniest story that I remember is that they caught a guy that had been repeatedly vandalizing car lots and stealing parts in town. Per my dad, this was going on for months, and this guy kept evading them. My dad was riding with Chuck Welpley at the time, and they caught the guy hiding in the engine of a truck in a car lot on the corner of Des Plaines and Roosevelt. If you were a criminal, the last 2 guys that you would want to apprehend you were my dad and Chuck Welpley. My dad was a big person, but Chuck Welpley played offensive line in college and was gigantic. They swiftly brought this criminal to the Des Plaines Cemetery and conducted their own trial, acting as both judge and jury. They dangled him by his ankles on a bridge over the Des Plaines River to get a prompt confession. As my dad and Chuck put it, he confessed to everything, even including killing Abraham Lincoln. In those days, most criminals knew to stay out of Forest Park because of hearing stories like this. The ones that didn't, most likely learned the hard way. Okay, I think you're up. I think you could add to the one thing my dad used to ride around with Chuck Welpley after the bar closed, and the other police would refer to that car as the Chuck wagon because there was 2 Chucks in the car. And you want to tell the rest of this, or you want me to tell them? And so one time they were doing something and there was something going on that needed extra police support, and the cops were getting a little bit overwhelmed. And they made an emergency call to the chuck wagon. The criminals were winning before the chuck wagon showed up. And they said when the chuck wagon showed up, the odds quickly turned. So if you're on DraftKings, the odds quickly swing the other way. And I don't know, Chuck, if you have anything to add to that one.
Nope, supposedly everything settled down after that.
Joe Burns, who that one?
He actually still...
Oh, is there? Oh, there you go. Is that right, Joe?
Well, after the bar scene, Dad went to work for 10 miserable years at Oak Park Hospital. Basically, he was in charge of anything mechanical in the entire hospital. And that may sound simple, but you can't believe how many things are in a hospital. The boilers, the air conditioners, plumbing, electric, lighting, fire codes, operating rooms. It even went into cleaning, garbage disposal, security. Yes, back then, the maintenance guys, the ones back there, where's Billy at? Oh. Yes, they became the security guards. He even used to move bodies in and out of the morgue. Anything that would break down in the hospital, he got the call. He was one of the first people I ever knew that actually carried a beeper. And God help everyone when the beeper went off. It's like when your alarm goes off in the morning and your stomach turns. It definitely wasn't the sound of excitement, and everyone in the house got nervous. We'd watch him pick up the phone and the F-bombs would fly. Then he would have to go into work. He missed holidays, family events, which the Duns were here, he missed plenty of those, and date nights. I can even remember him literally leaving in the middle of opening presents one Christmas, which was another F-banger. Speaking of F-bombs, and bringing the nuns from grade school into full circle, his bosses at the hospital were nuns. Part of his misery was trying to explain every problem and scenario that they knew nothing about. He would have to explain what needed to be repaired, what they needed for upgrades, and they couldn't understand. And everyone knows how my dad interacts with people when they can't get them to understand. He gets annoyed, ticked off, loud, excessive. The nuns started fining him for every swear word. It got to the point where he would go into meetings with a $20 bill, pay the fines up front, and say, just listen. I don't know if these nuns ever experienced so much blasphemy. And I'm sure these interactions didn't help with his review process that my brother was talking about at the pearly gates. In the end, he was actually loved and appreciated by everyone, especially the guys that worked under him. They would still call him as much as 3 times a day after he quit in 1982.
Okay, my dad worked full-time for himself after leaving Oak Park Hospital as an electrician. He always did electrical work on the side, even when he was working at Oak Park Hospital. But after he left the hospital, Pellegrino Electric was fully staffed and open 7 days a week for the next 30 years. He really enjoyed being his own boss, working on his own schedule. He never wore a beeper again, thank God. Oh my God, that beeper. We worked with our dad from the time we could hold a flashlight and carry tools until our mid-20s. Starting out at Pellegrino Electric was not pleasant. There was no formal training, very high expectations, and most importantly, no HR department. The first day on the job, you were expected to know the name of every tool and familiar with how it operates, the name of any material required to complete a job, and most challenging, be able to locate these items and retrieve them from my dad's van. Anyone that's seen my dad's van knows that the first Operation Midnight Hammer took place in the back of his van. Let's put it this way, it was not well organized. No labels, no inventory system, just shit thrown all over. At least that's what it appeared to me. During my early days of employment, the typical days went as follows. My dad would say, I'm going to need your help on a side job this weekend. There was no asking like today. It's not a choice. You're going to work, period. End of story. Page 55. Next, we were off, and my dad was crawling up into an attic somewhere. This was an amazing feat to witness firsthand. My dad was not the perfect size to be crawling up into attics. Many times I would glance at him, then glance at the access opening in the attic, and be like, there's no way he's going to fit through that hole. But he literally always made it. Once he was in the attic, I was working with the equivalent of a caged wild animal. It was usually hot in the attic, way too small for my dad, and full of insulation, which made it difficult for him to breathe. At this point, the fun really started. As the chief flashlight holder, I thought, how hard could this be? Shine a light where my dad asked. Simple. I quickly figured out that if anything went wrong with the work product that I was shining the light on, it was the chief flashlight holder's fault. The light was not bright enough, I was shining it in the wrong spot, I was shaking too much, you name it, the chief flashlight holder was to blame. I thought to myself, this was supposed to be the easy part. And then came the last thing you ever wanted to hear my dad say in your early years of employment at Pellegrino Electric. Anthony, I need you to go get me something out of the van. Here we go, let's have some fun. Do I know what he's talking about? I think so. Do I have any idea where it is in the van? No. The probability of returning successfully from this mission in those early years was always about 50-50. What could go wrong? Well, I already said that part. It took a lot of me to come back and tell my dad that I could not find something, as I dreaded the next steps. I would turn that van upside down before making the walk of shame back to my dad. The consequences of not successfully delivering on this mission were grave. Verbally abusive mentoring from my dad, then witnessing my dad come down from the attic, have to go down a few flights of stairs, all the way out to the van to find it for himself. Of course, he would find what he was looking for, and I would be completely demoralized. All kidding aside, I worked for him every summer and holiday break from middle school through high school, in college, and then occasionally even after college on weekends when he needed help. Like everything with my dad, there was a bunch of jokes, laughs, and funny stories from working together that more than negated the pitfalls of employment at Pellegrino Electric. Thank you.
Well, on the surface, and after this discussion, it might appear that my dad was a rough, insensitive guy. But really, he was a sweetheart. Just kidding. But he was very active in the community and cared about everyone in it. He literally knew everyone in town and was very active in our local Kiwanis Club. Now, I don't know if anybody's familiar with Kiwanis clubs or Lions clubs. I don't know if that's a thing anymore. But it was a local organization that fundraised to help kids and community involvement. They met every week, and some of my mom and dad's best friends were out of that organization. He was actually the president of the Forest Park Kiwanis Club, and then after they moved to Wooddale, became the president of the Bensonville Kiwanis Club. We have tons of memories volunteering for stuff, and I remember specifically one Christmas, We had a shopping list for 100 needy kids, had their ages and genders, and literally had to go to Toys R Us, our family only, and shopped for 100 kids at Toys R Us, brought the gifts home, wrapped them all, and then as a family we delivered those gifts one Christmas. And really to this day, I'll never forget the houses that we walked into. I mean, it was the craziest thing I'd ever seen, and definitely humbled me from then on. We actually also handed out turkeys and food baskets to those same families every year. One of the most fun days of the year was Kiwanis Peanut Day. I don't know what that is. But we would spend the day outside grocery stores and shopping centers. I see Linda back there. Her dad was part of that. But it was one of the biggest fundraisers of the year. My dad really did care for the underprivileged, and did what he could to make them feel whole. He was absolutely a huge part of these events and took pride in his involvement. He even became a troop leader for a local Cub Scout organization. I don't even know if I even think this is real or not. And organized functions and trips for the local club. He was the Forest Park electrical inspector. He's on the zoning board. Lastly, one year when our local Forest Park mayor was running unopposed, my dad couldn't stand that anybody could get elected unopposed and threw his name in the hat for mayor of Forest Park. I don't know if he thought he was so popular from all these other involvements, but he didn't care. It was kind of a joke and kind of serious. But from that point on, several friends called him mayor, which was really fun. We had a good, solid campaign, but ended up losing, and that was the end of his political career.
The official vote count was 3,054 to 730. Not in favor of my dad. I was the chief strategist of the campaign. I made 2 signs for my dad. One in my house and one in my cousin's house on Beloit. The existing mayor, we don't say his name out loud in my house, he had signs all over the neighborhood. And one of my strategies, it snowed one time, and I realized he had these huge signs on the sides of houses in our neighborhood. And me and my friends mistakenly discovered that if you hit these signs with a snowball, it was a wood frame and just paper across them, but they were huge. But if you hit them with a snowball, they would literally explode. We spent the weekend breaking signs. On Monday, went into school, I was pretty proud of myself. It was a good strategy. I only made 2 signs, but I destroyed at least 50 billions. Yeah, could have been billions, I don't know. Billions of signs.
It was beautiful.
It was a lot, it was beautiful. Anyway. The next thing I know, I'm in homeroom, laughing it up, and I get called down to the principal's office. Go down to the principal's office, and who's in the principal's office? Of course, the principal, but Chuck Welpley. And Chuck Welpley was either, I don't know, chief of police, sergeant, I think he was in charge of juveniles. And I knew who Chuck was. So I was more relaxed than I should have been, but I knew that he was my dad's friend. He knew me, and it was almost like the mayor personally sent him to check the box. Chuck Welpley came in and he said, "Are you breaking," let me say his name's out loud. No, I'm not going to say his name. "Are you breaking the mayor's sign?" And I said, "Yes." He goes, "Why are you breaking the mayor's signs?" I said, "Because my dad's running for mayor against me." And he goes, "You're going to have to stop breaking the signs." I go, "Okay." He goes, "Go back to class." And that was the end of that story. And I told my dad, when I told my dad, all he was worried about was, did you tell him the truth? I said, yeah, I told him the truth. I was breaking the signs because you were running for mayor. And he's like, okay, that's all you had to do. So he was happy with that. We could talk on and on about my dad and funny stories, but in the interest of time, we'll take a little break. If no one wants to say anything, I'll go back to some of my vetoed material that's way more interesting. But thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed hearing about my dad and his life. If you'd like to share a funny story or comment about my dad, feel free to do so. We have some other family members that are going to say a few things. And, thanks for listening. Thank you very much.
Okay, hello everyone. I'll take over after that. That was fantastic. Please give it up for my dad on the top. That was fabulous. You learned way more than you ever wanted to know about my grandpa just then. I'll tell you that for free. I want to thank you guys all for coming. I'm Bella Pellegrino. I'm the youngest grandchild and only granddaughter of Big C. And I bet you guys all thought the C in Big C stands for Chuck or Charles, right? I mean, that makes no sense, right? I'll tell you, it actually stood for cinder blocks. Did you guys ever see those guys' feet? Those double wide 14s were coming in heavy wherever he went, okay? I'll tell you that much. It's amazing to see how many people are here and everyone that meant something to my grandpa and that my grandpa meant to them. I mean, Grandma, how many times were we looking at the guest list and it just grew and grew, considering everyone wanted to come, and it just shows what kind of a guy our grandpa was. And everyone here knew my grandpa at different times in his life, as a young man, as a new dad, as a bouncer of his own bar, beating up people, and as a grandfather and everything in between. A jack of all trades, really. A Chuck of all trades, if you will. The kids and I are incredibly grateful to have had a grandfather like him. He taught us to laugh often and swear always. And he shaped us all into the people we are, and we're forever grateful to have him around, and so glad to be celebrating him here today, and thank you guys all so much for coming. And if anyone has a story, this is open to everyone, not just our family. Just by the way, it was a safe space if you wanted to say something. I mean, you watched all that. It's a safe space.
That was very good. I'm Alec. I'm the oldest grandchild. I'm here with my brothers Anthony and Austin. I'm the son of Chuck Jr. and Debbie. I wanted to thank you guys for coming out today. I'm going to share a few words on behalf of my brothers and my relationship with my grandpa growing up. As you guys know, Big C, he was a big dude. He was tall, he was heavy, he was loud, he was intimidating, especially for us as kids. This caused us to be a little timid around him growing up. Young kids don't typically gravitate towards such a loud and seemingly tough personality. He was old school. He loved his peace and quiet. The idea of peace and quiet did not exist in our household growing up. 3 young boys. We were constantly running around, being loud, wrestling, beating each other up. Whatever 3 young brothers naturally do. When our shenanigans caught up with us, or went too far, he was the first to let us know. At the time, we didn't understand why Grandpa acted like our behavior was so catastrophic to his peace. We were just boys being boys, messing around, really didn't think it was that serious. The feeling of confusion did not stop there. As kids, his jokes were weird. They made no sense to us. I'm sure you guys relate to some of these. The jokes were rarely kid-friendly. They were definitely not school appropriate. Our mother always had to make sure to remind us, do not repeat these jokes.
Some dead joke.
In addition, we didn't even understand the references. As the adults in the room would laugh, I remember thinking, this guy must be funny. but I don't understand a word he's saying. I don't understand anything. As it turns out, kids can definitely be annoying. They are more than frustrating at times. And looking back, I can see how the three of us would drive that guy up a wall. As we got older, we were able to relate to him more. My brothers and I started to mature. We understood what it took to keep Grandpa below his boiling point. We thought we did, and our relationship started to grow into more of a friendship. His jokes started making sense, and as you know, he was a pretty funny guy. He became one of our favorite people to be around. Listening to his stories of owning a bar, his volunteer police work, as Uncle Anthony stated, war stories, stories of the Navy, stories of raising my dad and uncle, stories of his own family, and many others were moments we started to cherish. Honestly, I don't know where they came from, but this guy had a story for everything. He never shied away from a story that involved someone else screwing up and screwing hurt him. Especially if he could share the part where he came in and saved the day. And we all know a guy like this, who's always the hero. My grandpa was that guy. Jokes aside, story time with him became something my brothers and I really looked forward to. What we learned from a lot of these stories was my grandpa was not scary at all. He was definitely irritable, he was definitely intimidating, but he wasn't scary. Under that hard shell was a very kind and compassionate man. He was empathetic, and he cared about the little guy, always. He had a moral compass that followed him his whole life. He did what was right, always. He was honest, he worked hard, and what you saw is what you got. He was unapologetically himself, and my brothers and I came to truly appreciate and respect this about him. I was recently blessed with my first daughter. I think you guys know her. She's amazing. When I was deciding on a name, I started to realize how many names exist in the world, and there are a lot. It makes it seem like choosing a name can be easy. It's not. Most of the names reminded me of someone I didn't want my daughter to share a name with. I feel like this is a common experience amongst new parents trying to name their first kid. But suddenly, it dawned on me, and I was looking right over the perfect name. I couldn't help but think of my grandpa Chuck. In the end, we settled on the name Charlotte, with the expectation of calling her Charlie for short, named after my grandpa. My brother and my experiences with our grandpa growing up made me realize growing older is definitely a funny thing. You start as a baby without a care in the world, and nothing bothers you. Nothing makes sense, and it doesn't have to. You get a little older, and you realize your parents and grandparents have had different experiences, and they've lived during different times. It's only as you mature and develop that you start to realize how similar our experiences are and how similar the human experience is. You may not understand someone or something right away, and that's okay. If it's anything like my brothers and my relationship with our grandpa, it will make sense in the end. We're extremely proud of our grandpa. He was a man of courage, conviction, and loyalty. He always stayed true to himself and true to his family. His presence always lit up a room and put a smile on everyone's face. It is clearly evident by this room full of people that love him very much, who he loved back. And I would just like to raise a toast to my grandpa, Big C.
Big C.
Cheers to Big C.
Well, I will say, I do appreciate everyone's patience with our presentation so far. My grandpa did live a very full life, and I think you guys have been great sports listening to all of us talk about him. Obviously, he meant a lot to us, and I just want to say thank you to my dad and my uncle for doing a good job of telling the story of his life. I also want to give credit to the kids for stepping up and saying something. I mean, now that I'm standing up here, I'm a little bit intimidated. Just a little bit though. So I'm gonna get into my kind of story about what I have for my grandpa, or at least what I want you guys to know about him from my perspective. So I'll start off with good afternoon, everyone. I wanted to take the time to thank all the wonderful friends and family for being here today. And for the not so wonderful ones, you know who you are. You guys are also appreciated as well for showing up today. My name is Nicholas Pellegrino. I'm one of Chuck Pellegrino's grandsons, and I'm going to share a few stories that I have about my grandpa today. It's no secret at this point that one of my grandpa's defining achievements was serving in the military. The U.S. Navy to be particular, and as my uncle and my dad shared with you, was that he was stationed in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. On the surface, you think, what a responsibility. One of the best naval ports in the country, but I'll just like to remind you that this is 20 years after World War II had ended. So it's pearly beaches and a bunch of nice boats. He told me personally that his deployment consisted of a lot of hours of tanning and that he enjoyed tending to the oil tanker he and his shipmates were assigned to. Come to think of it, now the only part that he mentioned enjoying was the perk of having their own chef on board. He also took a slew of classes in the military, and learning always seemed to be something my grandpa took pride in and enjoyed. I'm very proud of my grandpa for serving in the military, but based on what he told me, his service sounded like a pretty sweet deal. A free 2-year trip to Hawaii, and he had a boat. No wonder why our family loves boating. My grandpa did tell me about what every kid wants to know when they find out about someone who served in the military. Their first time they saw combat. The year was 2005, and High Command had given our young sailor the hardest task of his entire deployment. Time with his grandkids. My grandpa was forced into a defensive position behind my grandma as a way to shield himself from accidental love and affection. My family and I entered the house for a year-long stay at my grandparents' while our house was being built. I could smell the fear on my grandpa. A 5-year-old and a 3-year-old for 1 whole year, endless screaming and crying that he thought he'd never have to deal with again after raising 2 big crybabies who almost cried during the entire story about my grandpa. I'm talking about you, Dad. Can I hear that, sir, Dad?
Yeah, I got it.
Well, my grandpa's fears were realized immediately. Not a couple hours or days into the stay, I mean the second I entered the door. As he hid behind my grandma, who was ecstatic to see her babies, I took my brand new Spider-Man wrist blaster and steadied my aim. I knew the best chance I had to take down a man known as Big C was a shot to a vital organ. The eye. I channeled my inner Spider-Man, saving the day and delivered the best shot of my life. The plastic dart struck my grandpa directly where I had taken aim and rendered him immobile for a brief second. It was the best way for a 5-year-old to establish dominance over his superior. The dart was a message. This house is mine now, bitch. My dad and grandma proceeded to save me from an absolute ass beating. I've never seen my grandpa move with such speed. I mean, look at the images that are on the screen right now. It was startling. Kind of how you would be surprised to find out that a bear can run 40 miles per hour. I also never saw that Spider-Man toy again. And to me, that was a great way to summarize my grandpa. Thank you very much.
That will remind me of Big C. Cranberry cherry pie, chocolate chip cookies, chocolate milkshakes, shirts with car prints, but only if they have 2 pockets, heavy-duty suspenders, plus a belt, a fashion trend that started and ended with Big C. Unique vocabulary words. Easy now? I'm talking about gee-dongs and ditty bags. Hit cells. ravioli quality control, because someone has to tell you you're doing that wrong. Messed up punchlines, how to be a good sport when you're the punchline. I know there are a lot of food items on this list, but our family has spent a lot of time around the table eating, drinking, and laughing, and we will continue to laugh and smile when we think of Big C.
But no, seriously, Anthony, Chuck, that was fantastic for all the kids. It was great. And to Auntie Joni, who again,
Something.
you were his rock. You are also one of the greatest people I've ever met. And the nice thing is we may have lost him and we still have you. So thank you so much.
Nick, we actually have a story.
Oh, we do have a speaker. Oh, you know, just ignore everything I said.
I'm not a speaker, but I just, Cousin Chucky was the most excellent, wonderful cousin I ever could have wanted. I couldn't have asked for a better cousin. Try to keep me running.
Thank you.
I think that's it, everyone.
Great.
Cool. You want to play music so it's not awkward?
All right, we're gonna play music.
Everyone go to drink immediately. Rush the bartenders, all cue the music.